Today I'm having 2 minutes on the couch with Penny Blackwell. Penny Blackwell is the author of Loki's Joke, and Loki's Joke is her autobiography. It's her story, her transgender story from transitioning. She was born theoretically a boy, and she knew all along that she was not meant to be a boy, and eventually in her 60s she became a woman. Now, there's all parts of the story that I could read, along the way, but towards the back of the book, she has snippets under small headings to, little vignettes of her thoughts and from diary recordings and things like that. And there's a few of those that I'd like to read to you. One is called To Grow Up. There is a theory that people who undergo transition from one gender to another must grow through all the normal stages of development of their new gender, be they male or female, and there are an equal number of each. When they start living in their true role, their social identity is undeveloped and at about the teen stage. This means that they must go through all the stages of social development in their new role until they reach their chronological physical age. Many, if not most, if not all people who realise their female gender at first wear clothes and act in a manner far too young for their chronological age. Additionally, they often mimic the decade in which they were a teen and so look out of date. They pine for the times they were unable to share. That time for me was the lovely flared skirts of the 50s and early 60s with the stiletto heels. What stopped me from looking silly in the early 2000s, other than the fact such clothing was no longer available, was my fear of being sprung. Being in my early 60s and my sense of the ridiculous, plus not wanting to embarrass Frances and the children. Even so, it was sometimes difficult to toe the line. I have never worn some of my jewellery because it seemed too young for me, even though I thought it was great when I bought it. Do you think this looks all right? Frances has heard this plaintive request so often in regards to dress and jewellery. I did want to look feminine, but had to learn to do so age appropriately. I'm not 100% certain I have managed it even yet. I found that fascinating. It never occurred to me that if you transition from one gender to the other, that there was an age appropriateness that you had to take into account. You suddenly don't start being a 40-year-old woman if you've never been a 40-year-old woman. When you transition to being a 40-year-old woman, your head isn't there. It's probably still back, as Penny said, in your teens. And the things transgender people have to deal with that I never realised until reading this book. This next little section I loved. It broke me apart the first time I read it. It's called Milestones. I have used up 2 lipsticks and must buy more. I have used up 2 lipsticks. I have lived as a woman now long enough to need to replace my lipsticks. A pair of my knickers is no longer wearable and I must throw them out. I have lived as a woman now long enough to need a new pair of knickers. Wow, what milestones. It's funny to, when you grow up and you start wearing makeup, your favourite lipstick runs out and it's like, damn, I've got to go buy another one. This just throws a whole different light on that concept. It was just, great little piece. Another issue transgender people have is the people around them adapting to their change. There's a section here called People's Response. It is the pronouns that people have the most problem with. Of course, that is only for people who have known me in my previous role. It's no problem, of course, for those who have ever only known me as I am now. I've only ever known Penny as a woman, so I don't think of her as a man. I can't imagine her as a man, so it's not an issue for me, but I can understand how it will be an issue for her family and friends. She says here, I went to visit my only surviving aunt and her daughter, whom I had not seen for 40 years. On meeting, we weighed each other up and found ourselves comfortable. Throughout the visit, neither my aunt nor my cousin made a mistake. The pronouns were always correct, and so was my name. I think that's lovely. They obviously thought it through, they worked on it, and out of respect, they made the effort to get it right. And I think that's lovely. And she goes on here, I was frightened of people's responses. Living my changed role in public was so difficult for me because I was excruciatingly shy. I would stand behind Frances even while we were paying for petrol. I dared not open my mouth in case they guessed. I was like a teenager thinking everybody was looking at me. But worse, there was the potential for ridicule. It was over a year before I started venturing my voice with any confidence. I had visited 2 speech therapists. And that was another thing that never occurred to me. just because you change gender, you just don't suddenly start speaking with the voice of your new gender. You have to learn the intonations and have to be confident that you actually sound as you would be expected to in your new role. The first speech therapist had assured me I had nothing to learn and proved it to me by using a machine. I was always a singer, a tenor, and I had come to use the upper range of my voice with no falsetto. But I was not convinced. How could my voice possibly pass as female without any lessons? She just said, with your looks and your voice, how did you ever pass as a man? And I said, I wore a beard. This is a lovely section. I am a woman. June 2006. It is finished. It has begun. On Monday, I was informed from England that I am now legally female. My birth certificate shows my current name under sex. It has girl. All along I have felt it was so important to do this, and it has proved right. I am now so confident. Since being informed of my changed legal status, I have gained such confidence in myself, a confidence that was lacking before. Now I cannot be challenged even legally. There, it is on my birth certificate. It is in all the appropriate records in England. I have lost the right of an equal pension with a man. From here on, if I claim a part pension from England, I will receive less than I would have received last week when their records said I was male. Have I suddenly become worthless? Worth less? On what moral and real grounds is that so? But I can also marry a man. In Australia, only a woman can marry a man, and I can marry a man. Not that I could ever leave Francis to do so, but at least I have the legal right. It is interesting to note that the only government department that refuses to recognise my new status is the Australian Department of Births, Deaths and Marriages. For some obscure reason, they still refuse to put female on my change of name certificate. Talk about concrete. Talk about blockheadedness. Nevertheless, I am a woman. There's another short section here on strength. I found becoming physically weaker a bit of a joke, and in some ways welcome, as it emphasised my increasing feminising. As a man, I did some interesting things. I went to university as a mature age student and then became a teacher. I taught in special education in schools, adult literacy and TAFE, and English as a second language with the Adult Migrant English Service. I got a master's in linguistics. Okay, so that is not so interesting as to be worth boasting about. What I also did in my spare time, with Francis doing the painting, occasionally offsiding, was build 5 houses and renovate 2 or 3. I always had to be doing something big, as that was one way of keeping the pain at bay. I needed all my physical strength to build houses, though I never looked big and strong. I never weighed more than 10 stone 7, and I was only 5 feet 7 in height. My hands were strong, and the strong handshake the doorman had taught me now came naturally. That was then. Now Frances and I usually undo a jar together. She holds the jar and I twist the top. Even then we sometimes fail. This was a joke at first, but not anymore. What about all those old ladies living on their own? How do they get the lids off? Surely with all the technology, manufacturers could design a lid that is airtight but can be easily removed. I find that fascinating. Someone has suddenly been able to step across the divide between male and female, and if you know me well, I'm not a big feminist as such. I'm more of a peopleist. But Penny's, she stepped across, and she's realised she can see very clearly the difference between the things that affect the different genders in just daily life, just like opening a jar. I sing in a choir, having been invited to join. It's a great choir. The best little choir I've ever sung in. I sing tenor. I've always sung tenor, and quite honestly, I have a good voice, but have to sing only at the top of my range and in a voice that fits with the other female tenors. It gets a bit hard on the vocal cords at times. Sometimes I just want to ring out in the roundest and strongest opera tenor voice I know I have, but I don't, I won't, I can't, unless I'm prepared for the choir to know, and I'm not. Sometimes I want the freedom of having no secret, to tell everybody. But even more, I want to be taken, quite naturally, as just another woman. And the two don't seem to go together. I could be wrong. A friend read this manuscript, and with other comments she said, "You're very courageous to publish it." That put me on my guard. Then the publisher said, "Are you prepared for the whole world to know this?" So I went over it and cut out some of the more embarrassing bits. So I sing in a choir, play croquet, belong to a poetry reading group where all the men have white beards and the women are their erudite equals. I'm also a member of an organisation that raises money for charity and the business continues. I have quite a few friends. I communicate frequently with my sisters by Skype. Hopefully this feeling of being alone will pass. So, if you're transgender or transsexual, or if you're friends with somebody struggling with transgender issues, or a family member wanting to know more, I can strongly recommend Loki's Joke. The pain that Penny went through during her life is no different to the pain that a lot of your transgender, transsexual friends will be going through. And reading this book, if you haven't picked it up from some of the little bits I've been reading to you now, it opens your mind up to what these poor people have to deal with until they're brave enough to come out and say, this is me, and this is how I have to live. And you know, any transgender person that's any transgender person, no matter where they live, what culture, what society, what country, they need support. They need our non-judgmental support to help them work out what's the best way for them to live their life honestly. Thoroughly recommend Loki's Joke to help you come to grips with any issues that you're struggling with your own transgender issues or someone near and dear to you. It's available through Amazon, usual online retailers, your favourite ebook shops, and the moshshop.com.au. Hope to see you reading it soon. Cheers.